Okie doke, we can hear my voice. And let's do this. Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Markowsky. Welcome back to my studio. And today we are going to learn more about how to paint. So, last class, we began with a very simple color wheel. And we're going to build on that color wheel and we're going to learn how to mix across the color wheel. And I'll explain what all that is in just a couple of seconds. So you're certainly welcome to watch and paint along with us right now. It might be a little bit easier to do that if you go and watch the previous episode first. But let's get right to it. Oops, I want to get rid of that. Let's do this. Okay, there we are. Da, 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 da. Okay, so this was what we did last class. We did a very simple color wheel, and I'll get the overhead. Why did that disappear? Okay, so we painted that in the previous class, right? So we began with 2 yellows, 2 reds, and 2 blues, which are warm and cool temperatures of each of those colors or hues. So next class, I'm going to do a whole class talking about what warm and cool colors are, how to identify them, and most importantly, how to use them and how to use them effectively. Because this whole idea of warm and cool colors was not something I learned when I was in art school. It was something that I hadn't really even heard of it until after, like a few years after I graduated from art school, and then I was painting, and I was having more and more problems with my painting, especially because I started selling more and more paintings, and then buying more and more colors, of which I have hundreds, probably thousands of dollars invested, maybe more, in paint. And then I started doing some research. How come my paintings, the first paintings I did, aren't, or are they better than the paintings that the new ones I'm making with all of this extra, more expensive paint? And so I started doing research, started going to the library, reading about color theory, and realizing that all the stuff I'm teaching you right now is not anything new, but it's not something that I think even a lot of painters, let alone artists, actually know about or practice. But once you learn it, it's so obvious that it's bizarre that more artists don't practice this particular system. So again, this is not something I've totally invented, but it's sort of a bit of my mission to share it with more people so that they don't have to go through the years of frustration that I went through. Okay, so as I mentioned, so this is an example of what we were working on last week, right? We created the color wheel, and today what we're going to do is we're going to paint across the color wheel. So we're going to start painting these colors inside. Because what we know already, we know what happens when we mix these 2 colors together. We're going to get these colors. We know what's going to happen when we mix these 2 colors, these 2 cool, the cool yellow and the cool blue. When we mix them together, we get these colors. And we know what happens when we mix these 2 colors, the magenta, the cool red, and the ultramarine blue, the warm blue. We know we get these types of violet colors, right? But what we don't know is what happens if we mix the cool blue with the cool red, or the warm red with the warm blue, or the cool red with the cool yellow, and so on and so forth. As you can see here, we're going to get lots of different results. And we're going to talk about, I think maybe after we do this, or maybe as we go through it, what is actually happening in here. And as these colors get closer to what we call the neutral core at the center. Okay, so that's a bit of a preview as to how things are going to operate. Now, as I asked kind of a little question in the corner, because in the comments, I'm curious what types or brands of paints people are using, because I'm live all over the world, and I'm curious if you're using Liquitex or Golden or Opus or Amsterdam or Artist's Loft or blah blah blah. Remember in the before the first episode, in our episode 0, I gave a recommendation of a number of different kinds of paints that I was able to find at my local paint stores, but I'm sure they're different all around the world. So, because those may result in slightly different kinds of paintings. Additionally, if you want me to take a look at your painting, whether it's even your color wheel, maybe you're having some struggles with the color wheel and it's not turning out like mine at all, and you're losing your mind, you're freaking out, well, take a picture of it and then send it to me via my Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Tag me in it, and maybe even in the comment section, let me know that you've sent an image, and then towards the end of the class, I'll pull it up and we'll put it on the screen here, and I'll give you feedback on that. And that goes for any of the other paintings we're going to make in the class. And it also goes for if you're watching this show like a year from now, still, I would be very interested to see your results, and I'll still give you feedback. I love talking to people about painting and art, so I'll just keep on going. And okay, so let's begin here. I'm going to get my bucket of materials, or box of materials, or however you want to think about it. So today I'm a little bit more organized, and I put everything in here. Maybe we don't need the overhead view for right now. So I've got my canvases, I've got my sketchbook or paper for making any kind of notes, and a pencil, of course. I've got not only stretched canvas over a frame, right? The ones that look like that. And then I've got canvas panels, and so I'm going to use one of these today. I've got a palette that I can reuse and I can wash. Of course, in the episode 0, I suggested, a dozen different types of ways that you could use palettes, from just recycled plastic in your home, or using wax papers to, cover some of your newsprint, etc. Okay, so I got my paints. I've got a cup here where I'm going to put some water in a second, and I got all my brushes. And I also am going to take a couple of these little rags made from t-shirts, and I think this here I can move to the side. I thought I heard it tumbling down behind me, which is always cause for a little bit of humor, right? Okay, so we're going to continue painting this painting. We're going to put all of the paint that connects all of these different colors, when I call painting across the color wheel. We'll do that today on this. And I'm also going to open another new canvas, because on this one, we're going to make a painting as we go with the colors we're making, so that because we're mixing all these colors, why not actually make another artwork while we're at it, right? Okay. Oh, also, I just have an old towel here with me just off to the side. It's like the kind of towel, my wife was actually going to donate this or throw it away, and I pulled it out of the garbage, because they're always helpful. You never know when that thing of water tips over onto the floor, or onto your carpet, or your pants, or your brand new $1,000 shoes, or whatever. Okay, so just gonna get all set up here. So on this picture here, I think what we're going to do is we're going to draw it right now, so that we have something. We're going to kind of like paint by numbers as we go. So I'll show you the image that I am going to use, And if you've taken one of my painting classes before, the ones I've done in person, come on, we have done something similar. We've used this one. So you can always, you know, I'll show you maybe a way that you could do something a little bit different here. So what we're looking at on the screen, oh, is that going to enlarge if I do? Of course it will, of course it will. Let me see. Oh yeah, let's stretch this across and then I'll shrink it down. Okay, so the image we're looking on the screen is by the artist Sonia Delaney. It's a flamenco dancer from 1916. And one of the reasons why I chose this is because it's a relatively simple painting that we can do. And we can also use it purely as inspiration. So rather than getting caught up in trying to paint it exactly the way it is in matching colors, I'm going to encourage you to use your imagination to have a little bit of fun and play. So rather than worrying about trying to paint, it's even kind of a little bit abstract too, which allows it to you to kind of do it incorrectly and still it looks pretty good, right? So, you know, it's a dancer kind of with her hands and above her head and one leg out and one leg, you know, so wearing a kind of a colorful dress. So we don't have to worry about, let's say, painting her top blue. If you wanted to paint it orange or purple or green, then you'd have the freedom to do so. So let me get another split screen up here with the painting, and then let's save this. Okay, so I'll just move this guy out of the way. Okay, so I'm going to draw this very, very simply. So let's imagine, I always like to, and I'm going to, you know what, I'm going to draw this darker than I would suggest you do it, because your paintbrush could pick up some of this paint. So just draw very, very lightly. I'm just kind of dividing it in half because it's going to make it a little bit easier for us to find where the middle is. If I look at this, this looks like the middle of her torso. So I would do something like this. It looks like a tooth or something, right? Okay, and then we've got this shape here with a circle. We've got another circle coming off here. So again, if you've taken one of my classes before, you could just draw a bottle, you could draw a cup, you could draw a dog or a cat or something very simple that you can then abstract a little. So here's a leg. Let's see, we've got another leg here, and let's see, got her head up here and some hair. I think this is kind of the bun in the back of her hair. Okay, there's one arm, and I know it looks like her other arm's coming up behind her head, but again, I'm not worried about reproducing it. I just want to get some inspiration from this. Okay, let's kind of continue some of these kind of circles for that dress. We can even do another one going this way. And then I'm going to do these kind of, I'm not even really looking at the screen now. I'm just going to kind of make a bunch of lines in the background that I can paint, use as just sort of, it's like puzzle pieces really. Okay, so I'll leave that there for a second. Well, maybe, let's see, there's this top of her outfit there. So depending on how I paint this, I can disguise the figure, right? I could make it look totally abstract, and by the end I could turn it upside down or on the side, and people might not have any idea what it is at all. Or depending on the way that I paint it, I could really highlight the figure in here, and I could make it really obvious what it is I'm painting, right? I could put, you know, yellows and reds on the figure and paint the back all in blues. And so therefore the figure would really pop out. So there's a lot of different options for you here. Okay, so I'll leave that up for a second while oops, let's go. Okay, so there's the paint. When I was teaching my drawing class, a number of people said, "You're going really fast," or people get really stressed out about that. So I know some of you may have done that really, really quickly, so it's a good time to take a sip of tea. Earl Grey or English breakfast are my faves, and then a little bit of chamomile before dinner. So I'm going to move this one off to the side, and I'm going to keep it kind of handy because I'm going to want to just kind of switch them back and forth every time I mix a new color. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm just going to draw a few lines here on my painting. And, you know, again, I did a little bit of drawing that was pretty dark before, just so you could see. So I'm just going to erase some of this. And I'm using an opportunity to kind of clean up this painting a little bit. Okay, that'll just make it maybe a little bit easier for those of you at home to not get confused by all my little crazy pencil lines. Okay, so as I said, we know what happens when we mix these two colors together because they're the ones on the outside of the color wheel, right? But I want to know what happens if I mix the warm red and the cool yellow, right? So, in fact, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to number this just so I can refer to some numbers and people don't get all confused, because it might be easier for me to do that. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. All right. So you don't have to put those little numbers on there, but just so if I'm referring to these things, it kind of helps. So again, I know what happens when I mix these together. In fact, maybe I'll just draw this little line, right? That's these connected. I'm going to connect these together. And then I'm going to connect 10 through 6 together. I kind of like that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw some lines over here, and I'm going to paint on them later on, but I'm just going to draw a line that connects this together. Again, you probably want to draw a little bit lighter than I am, just so it doesn't get too confusing, or because the paint is going to suck up a little bit of this pencil lead as you mix it. So you can, let's say, even if you're just painting with white and I have pencil line over top of it, it's going to add a little bit of gray into that picture. Okay, so I've now got 11 and 1. I want to find out what happens to 10 and 1. right, so I'm going to draw another line here. And then I want to find out what happens to 1 and 6, so my cool yellow and my warm blue. Okay. Now, I just want to make sure this is kind of maybe where it gets a little bit confusing for people. So I just want to kind of go a little bit slow here. I know some of you maybe, I don't want to frustrate people, but I think avoiding any kind of confusion is helpful. So now I want to find out what happens to my warm yellow and my cool blue, right? Because I know what happens when I mix these together, but I don't know what happens when I mix these together. All right, so okay. I also want to know what happens when I mix my warm yellow and my cool red together. Okay. And I want to know what happens when I mix my warm yellow and my ultramarine blue, my warm blue, together. Okay. So you see there's a kind of nice little symmetry happening. And from each of these colors, we have 3 lines coming out, radiating out of them, right? Like sunbeams kind of coming out. So you see 1, 2, 3 coming out of this one, 1, 2, 3 coming out of this one. And we're also going to need 3 coming out of these. A few of them already have lines. So the first one here, let's see the warm red and the cool blue. We're going to connect those. So we're going to draw a line right across the color wheel. Okay. And I know what happens when I mix the cool and the warm, cool red and warm blue, but I don't know what the warm and the warm are going to be. So let's draw a line connecting that. Okay. And then last but not least, because everything else has been connected, the cool red and the cool blue I'm going to connect. Okay, and time to take another sip of tea. So I know maybe many of you joined up to this class thinking, I can't wait, we're going to do some crazy painting, it's going to be so much fun. And then you're like, oh man, we're going to be doing all this like really like detailed charts and like, oh my goodness, this is such a downer. Well, you know what, if you really want to know how to paint and you want to do it properly and you really want the proper foundations to set you on the right path, then doing some of this little bit more kind of slower, less exciting work is absolutely essential. I cannot stress it enough because you know, there's a lot of other painting classes out there on the web you can tune into, and you start painting and, you know, it's like a lot of fun, but afterwards you're not really sure how to do it yourself or how to get the colors you want. Like, you're just following along. If you do this kind of thing, you're going to really uncover the real power behind all of these colors, because my intention is for you to be able to do all of this on your own and to really understand how color works. Okay, so it looks like we've got this. So this kind of looks like this crazy pentagram or I don't know what kind of star-like shape, or and I personally think these things look really cool when they're finished. That's why, you know, I think I wanted to paint on a canvas, because when they're all done, you may want to hang it up. Now, maybe the first time you do this, it looks all kind of wonky and weird, and there's like chicken scratch notes all over the place. But I think once you understand it, you're like, oh, you know what? Maybe I'm going to go back and do a really nice version of it that I can hang in my living room, or wherever it is that I'm painting, and I can refer to it, but it also looks like a kind of neat artwork in and of itself. Okay. So I think we are ready to jump into the paint. Are you ready? You got your painting clothes on? I not only have my painting shirt on, but I've got another old t-shirt underneath it, right? You can see some holes in there, right? So that is because sometimes paint gets on your clothes and then seeps through. So, and I often have that happen where I'm wearing my painting shirt and then I've got a nice t-shirt or something underneath, and then when I'm washing my paints, I'm kind of, my belly's right up against the sink and water splashing on it, gets through the shirt, and then I take this off thinking, oh, this is great, I'm going to go out and meet my friends for dinner, and then, oh no, that, you know, that nice t-shirt or whatever, nice slacks or whatever. So that's why I think about like putting painting clothes on like my uniform, right? It's my suit of armor. I'm ready to go to battle. Okay, so let's set up our palette with some paint on it. So I like to ideally put the colors on my palette in the same way that my color wheel operates. So at the top here, I'm going to put in some of my warm yellow, right? Maybe I'll just leave that there for people to see, right? And that actually might be, you know, if I don't have, I have anything around here that for size. Again, you're thinking about like how much you would put on your toothbrush, because, or even just think about last class, how much paint you put on your palette, and then how much you ended up having to wash down the sink or throw away because you didn't use it. All right, so just sort of be mindful of that. Okay, I'm going to put some warm red on my palette right there, and then I'm going to put some cool red on my palette here. You can see I've left a little bit of space in between the colors rather than doing them all in one little quadrant, because I'm like, oh, it'll be easier to clean. Yeah, it could be easier to clean, but then it could be a little bit more difficult to kind of mix my colors because they're all kind of jammed into one little area. I'm going to put my warm blue right here. My ultramarine blue there. And then my final color is my cool red, or my cool blue, oh, sorry, right here. All right, kind of this nice little symmetry happening. Okay, so maybe I'll leave that there for a second, right? So I have my warm colors here, warm yellow and red, cool blue and yellow, cool red, and warm blue, right? So this is maybe, some people are like, how come this one, we don't have all the blue, the warms here and all the cools here? Wouldn't that make more sense? Or, you know, maybe, but at some point there has to be a meeting of the cool and the warm, and that's in the violet area here. Okay, let's move these paints over here. And, you know, lastly, you know, if you have any doubt whatsoever if what I'm saying is the truth or not, all you got to do is make one of these color wheels like I'm doing here, and it's, I mean, there's no way for me to hide this. It's not like I'm making any of this stuff up. It's like, you know, again, I like to use analogies with cooking and stuff, you know, like you can doubt that you need to put, you know, milk or eggs into your baking, and you could substitute it with something else, orange juice, because you think I'm crazy, but you know, you're going to get a unpleasant surprise when you try to eat your muffin afterwards. Speaking of which, my wife made a nice little muffin cupcake here for me for it was my birthday actually on our first show, and so I'm having a little bit of my birthday muffin. Okay, I'm gonna get a little bit of water in my cup, and then we're gonna start painting here. So have this little sip of tea real quick. A question that might come up for some people is, should I use warm or cool water or lukewarm water in my water? I would suggest it would be something lukewarm. Cold, lukewarm would be fine. You probably don't want to have super hot water, and you probably don't want to have freezing cold water, just for, especially if you're going to mix it into your paints. You want it basically to be the same temperature as the paint itself is, so that you're not creating any kind of, you're not cooking the paint or freezing the paint when you mix it, because that could cause some little chemical reactions happening. Okie doke. Well, so let's, maybe I'm going to start here with this yellow. And so I'm going to get a little bit of the, move that off to the side just a little bit. So I'm going to get a little bit of this warm yellow on my paintbrush. And like I said, I'm just going to kind of get into the bristles of the brush. Okay. And I'm also, just while I'm right here, you know what, I can show you again really quickly what the original is. But is there any of this warm yellow in the painting? I don't really see any. So you could put it wherever you want, right? So let's say I'm going to put this warm yellow right up here. Now you do as you see fit. And what could be kind of really neat is, you know, if we have, 50 people right now watching, and many more afterwards, if people take pictures of them and then tag me in your Instagram or your Facebook, or send them to me as messages, it'd be really neat to see them all together side by side. I could create some kind of collage of them all together. So just a little cool idea, because wouldn't it be neat if everybody made it, but made it a little bit differently, and then we could see all of these cool different paintings? Just gonna move my wow, so look at all these comments. Okay, I will try to get to some of those comments here as I go. Maybe next time I take a quick little break. Okay, so I want to mix the warm yellow and the cool red. And not to belabor the point, but I already know what warm red and warm yellow are. So I'm going cool yellow, warm yellow to cool red. All right, so all of this is dry, so I don't have to worry about mixing. So I'm going to take a little bit of paint, right? Let's see, show you that. Right, so, and I'm just going to put this right here. Right, and maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix this a few times. So let's say I'm going to put this up there so you can see that mixture. Because what I'm going to do, I've mixed a little bit of that paint. So I'm going to draw this line like that. And then I'm going to add a little bit more of it to my mixture. Now, you don't have to do that. You could do this whole line as one, but just for the sake of comparison, I'm going to, sort of like what I did here, I'm going to add more and more red, cool red to this mixture, so that it kind of shows me a little bit about how that color changes. Now, looking at this right now, not a lot of difference between these colors here. So if I can back that back up, right? It's not too different. But one thing I do notice is this color that I just made with the cool red and the warm yellow especially when I get a lot of the cool red in it, it starts to look a lot like my warm red, right? So what's happening is I've added warm yellow to my cool red, and it starts to kind of get a little bit of the warmer red quality. At the same time, I do not, of course, as I've mixed this together, get a little bit more of the warm yellow, because the yellow is such a light color, we're not going to see that transformation happening. Okay, so we're going to be washing our brush quite frequently, so I'm just going to, because I don't want any of those colors contaminating my next mixture here, so. And you know what I forgot to do? And I'll do this many times throughout today, so I'm just going to take this and this color, and I'm going to put it in here somewhere. Mix a little bit more, and let's see, I'll put this down here. And you can go outside the lines if you want. You have my express permission to do so. So this is just going to, I kind of find it fun to, and this is the way I usually paint actually. I like to just attack a canvas with kind of random colors and go a little bit faster than my brain is able to criticize or judge, so that I can just kind of fill up the canvas as quickly as possible, and then when it gets pretty close to being finished, I can go back and I can paint over things that I don't like. Okay, so I'm going to wash my paintbrush again and do this whole thing all over. Let's see. So now what I want to do is the warm yellow and the warm blue. Right? So if I look at my palette, I'm going to mix this warm yellow and this warm, I'm going to mix this warm yellow with this warm blue. And it doesn't matter whether I mix it here or down here. Right now, that was a little bit too much blue that I put on my paintbrush here, so let's see. I get a little more on here. Okay. Okay, and while I'm right here, let's put a little bit of that on my painting. Of course, you could do this all afterwards, but while I've got the color mixed, why not use it? Let's add a little bit more blue to the mixture here. So immediately, look at the difference between when I mix the warm yellow and the warm blue, the kind of green that I get as opposed to this green. Right? This is like a fluorescent lime green. Very different. Okay, now I'm just going to add a lot more blue to this mixture. And then paint this in. And before I wash my brush, let's paint this. Obviously, you don't have to hold your canvas up above your color wheel. If you're at home, you can just, move a little bit to the side. Okay, cool. So again, I can wash my paintbrush because I'm not going to use those colors again. Oh, thanks everybody for the birthday wishes. That's sweet. Okay, now I want to know warm yellow and cool blue. So number 15 and number 5. 15 and 5, right? So again, that's my warm yellow. Let's take a scoop of that. Maybe I'll take even more. Take a scoop of that. And then this right? And again, that was a little bit too much. I got a little excited. So, spread my way around here. Okay. Add a little bit more. And even more. Oh, maybe I need even more blue in there. Right, it's okay if they're little blobs like mine. Again, if you wanted to make yours really, really pretty, then you can just spend a little bit more time making it pretty. You may find you might want to just paint it once around, and then once you understand how it's all working, you could do another version of it. And, you know, you may find after doing this first color wheel that some of the colors aren't as bright as you hoped, in which case that might be a good reason to go out and buy a different red or a different blue in order to get a more saturated color or less saturated color. Although in a few weeks I'll show you when we talk about how to modify a color with white and black and gray, how I would still say, I mean, there's no reason to ever go out and buy any other colors than the ones that you have right now. These should last you for years if you take care of them. So I'm just got a little bit of paint in my palette. I'm just going to quickly use up here. The other thing I would suggest trying to do throughout this course is trying different brushes. So if you've got a set of brushes, you may want to try a few of them and just see like what your experience is like of using those brushes. Does you like one more than another? Okay. Maybe I'll back that away so you can see me washing my brush. Okay. I like that sound. It sounds like, what does that remind me of? Is that Mr. Dressup or Mr. Rogers? Like the train coming in? Who might that be? It's the whoever is on the who drives the train in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. Okay. Now let's do some more yellow. So I'm going to move to my cool yellow, and I'm going to draw the lines between my cool yellow to my warm red. Right? Because I know what happens when I mix my warm colors, my warms, but not my cool yellow, my warm red. Right? So if I go back to my palette, it's going to be that yellow and that red. So I'm going to do some scoops of that. Okay, add a little bit of red to my mixture. Look how quickly yellow changes, right? So I've got that color. Let's put that to the side. And this is either exciting or annoying, is making these lines. You could paint right over top of them. Just be careful that if that paint is still wet, it's going to get mixed in to your colors. All right, I'm going to add a little bit more red in here. And then so again, these, I find the oranges probably show the least amount of change when we're mixing the colors in this way. It doesn't mean that they're not different, and we would see a bigger difference if we were painting larger areas, larger surfaces. But where we're really going to see the difference is when we mix our purples or violets. Of course, we've already seen a little bit of that with our greens, right? All of the songs that I hum these days are directly from Peppa Pig, which is on in our house virtually from morning till night. Well, it's my wife will kill me if I say so, because it's not entirely true, but it's probably only on for about an hour a day. But I've seen every Peppa Pig episode probably at least 100 times, if not more. So I don't, since we have a 1-year-old daughter, I don't find myself humming, you know, Rolling Stones or Bob Dylan or, you know, Justin Bieber. It's Peppa Pig. It's the only thing going on in this head of mine these days. Okay, so here's this picture so far. Right, so I'm gonna just add. You can see I'm slowly building up color, and maybe at this point it still feels a little frustrating. You're like, why is this like green and this one's looks a little bit odd? Hey, I don't even have to worry so much at this point if I'm just kind of plotting the colors in. Another way you can do this is just turn your picture upside down so it stops really looking like a person at all, and then it maybe frees you up just to throw colors into different places. Okay, so where are we next here? So now we've joined all of the warm yellow up to, we know basically what it will result if we mix any of those colors together. Now, if you really wanted to go nuts and you wanted to find out what happened when you mixed the warm yellow and the purple, number 8, together, you could do that. If you started doing that, you're going to have a whole bunch of lines crisscrossing all over this canvas, and it's going to get super confusing. So doing this is not only a little bit clearer and easier to understand, but we essentially, and actually next class we're going to start really painting with warm, we're going to understand what warm and cool colors do and what happens if we were to actually do something like that, which is where things get really, really interesting. But one step at a time. Okay. Mr. McFeely. Was that Mr. McFeely who drove the train? I love that. Thank you very much, Madeline, for showing that. I'm just going to shrink this window here. I'm pleased to see so many people have come back and are painting along with me after last week's episodes. Last week's episode, we had so many people, and I noticed about another 300 people afterwards have watched it over just the last couple of days. And usually they just keeps going up and up and up as people share and spread the news about the class. So, you know, if there's 50 of you watching right now, so if everyone just shared this on their Facebook and let people know about how the fact that they're learning how to paint from scratch, then those numbers would keep going up. And then imagine how cool it would be to see all of your paintings side by side. Okay, so let's do the cool yellow and the cool red. So let's mix that across the color wheel. All right, so that's number 1 and number 10. So cool yellow, let's take a scoop of you. Put that right down here. And then take just a little bit of that. Okay. And maybe I'm going to lighten it up just a bit. So there's nothing wrong, again, with you just kind of making one mixture, but I just think while I'm doing this, it's not too much more to ask just to add, try doing this a few different steps. And doing this, by the way, I don't know, this is something that I think I may have created myself. I don't know if where I remember seeing this particular kind of exercise. So again, this is just something I started doing on my own to help me understand the colors that I had. Because again, like I said earlier, when I first started painting, when I graduated from art school, I didn't have a lot of money. And so all I could afford was a really limited paint set like the one that we have, right? Because that cost like $100, and that was like a lot of money for me at the time. So then I was painting, and I got great paintings with bright, saturated colors. And then when I started making some money, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to the art supply store and buy all the colors I've always wanted, right? So I buy these like iridescent orange and blah, 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 all these kind of things. And then I go to my studio and I had them all. There's some videos from probably 10 years ago or more on my YouTube, the earlier ones, where you can see how many colors I have. And yet what was so frustrating is my paintings started to go downhill and things started getting weird and muddy, and like there wasn't any nice unified colors. And that was because, like, instead of making an orange by mixing these few colors I had, I would just squeeze some orange out of a tube. And it had nothing to do with any of the other colors that I had used, and therefore it just seemed a little bit odd. You know, it's like, so then I would have, let's say, 100 different colors, each one from different tubes on my painting. And it's like that feeling, it's like if you go to a restaurant and you eat some food that just has way too many spices in it, and you're just like, wow, there's bites that are good, and whoa, that one's a little bit sour. That's a bit sweet, and and so it's, rather than just kind of a consistent kind of nice flavor throughout. Sometimes when I try to take these metaphors too far, they just fall right apart. Okay, I'm just going to add a little bit more. Let's maybe start doing the background here. One thing that I personally like to do, which would drive some people crazy, is I kind of like mixing my paint on the painting itself. Right, so I might take some pure yellow from my palette and just try to mix it right in here, as opposed to mixing it on the palette and then applying it to the painting. Personally, because I like, when I look at my paintings, to see a slight variation in the color. I think that's really neat. It makes it just look like it's more alive, and there's maybe, it almost sort of looks a little bit three-dimensional sometimes, depending on the way you do it. I know some other people want a super consistent flat color. There's lots of very well-known artists that use that method. There's lots of very well-known artists who use my method. So whatever works best for you. Oh, I was going to say, so this here, remember at the end of the last class, I had this rag which I wiped all my paint off my palette and I could have thrown out. Well, here it is. I just let it dry on the edge of my garbage can, and I can use it again over and over and over again, right? So I'm always just, sometimes I lay in bed at night worrying about how much garbage there is in this world, and especially sometimes as artists, we end up creating a lot of it. Whether it's, tubes of paint that they're half full, we throw out, they go into the landfill, or washing paint down the sink. It's always just like, how can I not be like such a wasteful person? That deserved a tea break. Okay, so let's go to cool yellow, warm blue. Cool yellow, warm blue. Cool yellow, warm blue. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it would be helpful. If it's helpful for you, let me know. Maybe I should make a little label here so that people can really see which colors I'm using when. Okay. Obviously, I've been doing this for years, so it's not something that I would normally do for myself, but I could see how it could be really helpful for people to have, if you had your palette to make a little note on it. Okay, this is the warm yellow. Because I know when I'm teaching these classes in person that often it's, I would say, invariably at some point people get confused and they paint the wrong color in the wrong place, or the right color in the wrong place, or the wrong color in the right place, or the right color in the wrong place, or however that goes. Okay. And then okay. I love seeing how these different colors interact with one another. Personally, I just find it so satisfying doing this, because for me, what is happening is I am demystifying the color mixing process, right? Because rather than me just looking at this and saying, okay, I want an orange, which orange, I can just be like, okay, well, I want this orange, or I want that green, as opposed to that green. How did I get that green? Oh, I mixed those two colors together. Boom, easy, right? And you know, when you're learning to paint, there's a lot of information coming at you. So the more that you can simplify this process for yourself, the easier it gets, the less time it takes. You know, one of my favorite quotes, I think it's by Baudelaire, the painter, is like, the goal of any artist should be as easy as digestion is for the healthy adult. It's not easy, is not the right word. It's a French poem, of course, so the translation. But the idea is that, you know, when you're eating a piece of pizza, you don't think about how to release the juices in your stomach to digest the pizza. You just eat it and move on, right? That's the goal when you become an artist, is how do I just do this stuff without thinking about it constantly? How can I just have fun painting without worrying about how did I get that color? What did I do, right? So that's why spending a little bit of this time, which is maybe not the most enjoyable use of your time, right at the beginning, makes every painting you do from here on in so much easier. I wish someone out there had been around 20 years ago, like myself, to teach me how to do this. It would have saved me at least 7 years off the top of my art career to have been able to watch this episode. So, you know, if you're finding this helpful and you want other people to save some time when they're kind of beginning their painting journey, I would love it if you liked and subscribe to the channel, like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when the new videos are coming up. I've created the next 2 thumbnails for this series. They're on the YouTube channel, so you can hit the reminder bell so you'll know when those are coming up next Tuesday and Thursday. Okay, warm red and cool blue. Warm red, cool blue. So I look at this, warm red, cool blue, right? Warm red, cool blue. So again, there's no reason why I'm mixing it here rather than here. It's just maybe the space a little. Eventually going to have to use some of this space here. Whoop, that's a lot of blue. Okay, so what I just did is I took a big helping of blue here, and rather than turn this into a mixture and have to scoop more red on here, you saw how I just kind of, I twisted my brush in my fingers there to get most of that paint, the blue, off, and then I can kind of dip back into it, right? Because if I smudged this all together, it would be really hard to lighten it back up to this color that I have right now. Okay, so let's paint across here. So this is my warm red. Okay. And then let's dip into this blotch here. Make it darker. A little nice symmetry there. And then okay. So boom, look at this. Let me see. Hard to really see the full results on your computer screen or television screen that I see here. If you're painting it at home, look at the difference between this so-called purple or violet that I've just mixed, right? Because technically a red and a blue should make purple, right? But look at the difference between that color and this color, right? One is, and again, it's a little bit hard to see, but this is a really nice purple. This one here is quite frankly, it looks brown, and as I get closer to the blue, it's like a really dark blackish blue, right? So there's nothing wrong with that color if I want that color. If I want to mix like a dark brown, dark blue, now I know how to do it. I can just mix these two colors together, boom, there I go. But if I don't want that color and I was to mix that color, I would keep thinking, what am I doing wrong? What's going on? How come my purples are looking so bizarre, right? And that's, again, what took me years to figure out. And a lot of the stuff, you know, it was a different world back then. There wasn't YouTube and the World Wide Web. I can just kind of jump online and do some research. You'd have to go to the library, read up. You'd have to, you know, visit other artists and talk about this at length and talk about what paints people. Oh, maybe it's my golden paints. Maybe I got to switch to Liquitex, right? And you couldn't figure out what was wrong. And just all of this needless fussing and like, so this episode should be titled, this is what I wish I had learned 20 years ago. Let me see, I'm just gonna, while I've got some of this, before I wash my paintbrush, just gonna throw some more paint in here. Again, I could use a larger paintbrush for some of this. Personally though, again, I like that little bit of variety that happens when I'm using a smaller paintbrush. You would see the result, you would see the actual brush strokes that make up that large area. I think somebody asked me a while ago about palette knives and said like, oh, maybe like in your video you didn't mention what palette knives to get. Which palette knife should I get? So maybe that's just a quick, cool little detour that I can give here, because I do have some of them. And why would I use a palette knife? When would I use a palette knife? Palette knife, give me a break. I was going to drag that, there's a whole tin of them back there, and I was going to pull them all out. And then I realized they're supporting like a whole bunch of books, and they would all collapse and fall all over the place. So, what's the difference between all of these tools? All right, look at all these funny looking things. The main reason to use a palette knife is originally would be to mix colors together on your palette so that when you actually go to paint, you've got a nice, clean, solid mixture. It's the same sort of thing, the difference between mixing something with like a spoon and a mixing bowl versus using like a electric mixer, is that what they're called, right? With the spinning prongs. What are they called? I think it's an electric mixer. Because that one, you know, is going to mix up all the food really, really, really well. And you know, you're not going to bite into a chunk of muffin and get a big chunk of egg, and then you bite another, and then you get a big blueberry. You know, like it's going to nicely distribute all of the ingredients. Same thing with a palette knife, right? So a palette knife, let me see, what is the next color on here? I've got cool red and cool blue to mix, right? So if I look at my color wheel here, I have this cool blue, or cool red, and cool blue, right? So what I would do is you would scoop some of that out, right? And depending on you could kind of put that one to the side, and say I would scoop a little bit of this out and put that to the side, right? So that they're nice and clean, so that I'm not getting, because you could see in places where, you know, I've scooped out a little bit of this yellow and it's got a little bit of red in there, right? I've got a little bit of yellow into my blue, right? So you could say that is, some people would lose their minds and say, oh my goodness, look how messy that is, right? So you can see there's lots of different shapes and sizes. And then what I would do is, these are essentially the same. The metal ones might be a little bit more flexible. And then I could do this kind of thing. And I'm squishing the paint together, really mixing that color nicely together. That would be the use of your palette knife, right? And I can also like scrape it right off. Right, here's this other one here. All right, and I can use that. So it's a little, the metal ones tend to be, you can go down a rabbit hole on these things, and there's some that are the same size but less flexible. Personally, I also paint in oil paint, and when you're painting with oil paint, by necessity, you're mixing other materials into the paint, like odorless mineral spirits, or turpentine is what some people use, or not so much anymore. Usually people recommend odorless mineral spirits, which is kind of like turpentine, but odorless, right? So it's not so like incredibly toxic smelling, right? And drives everybody in your house and neighborhood crazy. So you're needing to kind of mix those kind of materials into the paint more often. Personally, when you can also use these to mix in, like I've got, you probably can't see, but over here is probably about a dozen or more different types of acrylic medium, like that make the paint thinner or thicker, that allow you to paint on fabrics and so on and so forth, right? That you would want to maybe use a palette knife to evenly mix those things in. Personally, again, like I said before, I like having a little bit of color kind of popping out. So when I'm painting an area, I like it when there's a little bit of blue popping and yellow popping out of the green that I've mixed. Okie dokes. Okay, so let's come back here. How am I doing for time? Okay, so I think we'll finish this up probably in about another 5 minutes, and then we'll have some time to finish the Sonia Delaunay painting. And while we're doing that, I'll tell you some stories about her, because she's amongst my favorite artists for many reasons. She was an amazing person. She's long since passed away. So my cool red and my cool blue. All right, I'm going to mix these together a little bit here. Okay, let's add a little more blue to that mixture, and look at nice violet color that results. And then let's go adding a lot more blue. Okay, and maybe while I'm right here, let's I'm going to scoop some of this out, and let's paint this right in here. So a round brush, as this brush is called, with a very pointy tip, is very handy for getting into these real kind of tight corners, right? Because it's nice and sharp. I can kind of, it's like a pencil, like a nice sharp pencil. I'm trying to color something, I can just get it nice and sharp and just point right into that corner and get color right in there. So it has that huge advantage of precision. Now, as you start to kind of get more and more into art, you'll see that not every artist is interested or obsessed with precision, which maybe sound like, why would anybody not want precision? You know, pretty much in every other facet of life, precision is like the gold standard. It's what we are striving for, right? You wouldn't want a person who is sloppy making your dinner and, like, you know, condiments and all this stuff kind of dripping off on the side, and you get your plate at the restaurant, you're like, what on earth is this sloppy mess, right? That is not going to get you a promotion at the restaurant. When it comes to art, though, being imprecise could be a very interesting approach. Okay, so warm red, warm blue, and to complete this here, so my warm red and my warm blue here. Again, a little bit too much on my brush. So mix here. So that might have been a little bit dark to begin with. So I'm going to continue it here. Add more blue to the mix to get us here. Right, and right at the end there, it looks more violet looking. And I'm going to just rub some of that off and come back. It's hard to lighten that color up. The only way to do that would be to put a lot of it there or let it dry. And then paint over top of it. So, okay. So there is this completed color wheel. If you want, you could actually try to paint some of these, the words and numbers with your paintbrush. That would be a good exercise that would probably drive most of you absolutely bonkers, because it would be a little bit tricky, even for very skilled painters. I used to make paintings that based on comic books, and every time I had an art exhibition, there would be another artist who would come up and be like, wow, I really like the way you do your words. Like those letters, that's because it's tough to do something that precise with a paintbrush. So if you want an extra bonus activity to really work some of your painting muscles, try painting this and making it legible, right? It's going to take you some time. You're going to have to be really slow and patient. I would be turning my brush constantly to get a nice sharp edge as I did that. Okay, so I feel pretty satisfied with this, so I'm going to put it aside. Let's put it up here for this moment so it can dry, and it's still in the shot. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spend the rest of the time working on this and try to bring this to some sort of resolution. I'm going to, just for the sake of speed, I'm going to use a larger brush and one of these flat brushes, right? So we have these two, and I have, a few larger ones, so I could use any of them, but just for the sake, because I can get a lot of paint in here really quickly, and I might want to Oh, you see, that's what happens. Sometimes your paintbrush rolls across your painting. So I could use this paintbrush to kind of get most of this in. I could try to catch some of this by turning my brush up onto its side and getting into these corners. Or I can also use some of this to help me. So I'm just going to start throwing color in here. And I'll show you how I'm going to do this too. The approach I'm going to use, Amy? Amy?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just making dinner.
That's all right. Can you bring me an ice pack again, please?
Yeah.
Oh, this poor camera is getting so hot. Okay. Maybe while it's cooling down, I'm just going to keep on painting. And thank you, sweetheart. I appreciate it. Oh, Kyle. Poor camera. So, why don't you throw paint onto this canvas? Again, I would say let's try to get, like I do in my drawing class, I'm going to put a timer down here. And let's say in 15 minutes, let's get this whole picture just full of paint. All right? Here's 15 minutes on the timer. You see, look how dirty that screen is. My goodness, Michael. Stop eating French fries while you're using your tablet. I don't remember last time I had French fries, by the way, but okay. Those touch screens and how dirty they get our phones. It's a little bit alarming, isn't it? Okay. And because this is going to keep me up at night, I'm actually going to put a little bit of plastic there so that this ice pack doesn't drip through and into my camera. Something I neglected to do last time, and then it kept me up at night, hoping I didn't wreck my mirrorless camera. Okay. So, another thing too is when I got some paint on my brush, rather than just washing it each time, let's say I can use it in a few other places, right? So that I can make best use of it. It's because if I'm having to wash my brush after each and every time, it just takes time. One thing you may have also noticed that I have been doing is I've been using the same brush each time rather than using, let's say, 8 different brushes, like a different brush for each color. I do, especially with acrylic paint. Acrylic paint dries really, really fast, and which is a great thing because most of this picture is already dry, so I could rest my hand on it and not worry about smudging anything. But the problem is if you've got a bunch of different paintbrushes loaded up with paint and you set them aside, it's conceivable that within about 20 minutes they're all dry and those paintbrushes have been either ruined or severely compromised. You can kind of get with different I have some kind of pretty harsh cleaning materials that I can get the acrylic out of the paintbrush, sometimes years after it's hardened, but it effectively destroys the bristles, right? I've done that for some of my painting classes to see because paintbrushes add up in price and I don't want to have to buy new brushes all the time. So sometimes I try to rescue ones that students have accidentally forgotten to clean or didn't clean well enough, and to varying different results, right? Okay, I'm just going to let that camera above me get back to its happy place. And then we'll start it up again. Like cameras, computers, people, animals, dogs, we all need love and to be taken care of and to be treated fairly and nicely, Right, so that's my camera telling me that it needs just a little bit more attention. Okay. Another thing that I'm going to do, let's see if I can turn this guy on again. Okay. Another thing that I am going to do, which is to, rather than wash my paintbrush for a little bit, I'm just going to keep mixing colors with this brush that already has a cool red and a cool yellow on it. And I'm going to just keep on painting until the previous color kind of washes itself out or brushes itself out of off the bristles. Now, that can create a pretty muddy brush and color, because then we've just got dozens of different colors mixed in there. But I personally kind of like that look a little bit. It's not a super dirty color, but what it does do is it's going to very clearly create a color that did not come from inside of a tube. And I generally, personally, like it when my colors look like they've been mixed, right? I can look at it and feel like, oh yeah, there's lots of color in there, right? So you can see, maybe it's coming across in the video, I've got kind of orange and yellow and red, little kind of varieties in here. And so I'm not going to deny that from the painting. I'm going to let that kind of come through a bit. Okay. All right, so this big brush, it can be a little bit sloppy. So you see what I did there? I went a little bit over the green. And since it's still really, really wet, I was able to kind of just wipe a bit off with my finger, or you could use a rag for that as well. So I got 9 minutes left on my clock here. I'm going to do my best in the next 9 minutes to get as much... Well, I am going to get this painting filled in. And then when it's filled in, I'm going to take a second to step back and take a look at it and see if I'm happy with where the colors are. And I would suggest, if you're watching, that you approach your painting in the same way. Because especially when you're beginning, it's hard to know, like, to visualize what the finished painting is going to look like at an early stage until it is fully painted. Okay, let's get a little bit of blue on my brush here. And I also, one of my favorite parts, so you can see how my paintbrush, look, it's got all these different colors on it. And so sometimes that comes out when I'm painting it. And I probably, if I was like many of you when I was first starting out, that would cause me some anxiety. After having been painting for years, I find that I really like that, because there's a little bit of unexpected stuff. Sometimes really cool colors just kind of appear on the surface of the painting, and I want to be surprised a little bit. Because after you've been doing this for years, you're like, and sometimes you just want, it's exciting. It's like your painting is throwing a surprise party for you. You're like, whoa, I didn't know you guys were coming over. I didn't know you were going to show up, Mr. Teal and Mr. Crimson. Like, where have you been? It's been years since we've seen one another. Oh, I've been hiding in your paints for years. And you never mix me on purpose, so I just had to make an appearance. goodness. I think, teaching in, sometimes I think, I wonder if I'm just, if anybody's actually watching and I'm just sitting here slowly going insane, talking to myself in my basement studio. Pretend, turns out the camera wasn't recording. I haven't been going live or anything. It's happened to me a few times where when I've been teaching, because I've been, for this past couple of weeks, I've been teaching online. I teach university courses in the daytime, and there's been a few times where my microphone was muted. Any of you who've used Zoom or Blue Jeans any amount of time have probably had that experience, and you're talking away, explaining things, and I just see all the students sort of looking at me, and then like a few minutes later somebody's like, "Mr. Markowsky, your microphone is muted." "Hey, professor, your microphone is..." And I'm like, oh my God, how come no one said anything this whole time? I'm just... I just laughed to myself. What's funny is I think, like, do they think that I'm doing this on purpose? Like that I'm which is possible. I probably do some pretty weird things in class, but I just think, like, do they think that maybe today's lesson is on Marcel Marceau? Is that the famous mime? Whoa, Michael, I got 5 minutes left on the clock. Let's pick up the pace. Pick up the pace, Michael. Okay. So you see how I'm going to mix some of this paint right here on the canvas. Boom, just throwing it in. Why don't you try to do a little bit of that too? Maybe it drives you nuts. If it drives you nuts, well, the good thing with acrylic paint, you let it dry, depending on how thick you've applied it. Come back in half an hour or 24 hours later, it's fully dry. You could paint any other color right over top of it, and nobody would know. Well, depending on what colors you apply over top of it, it may be, we may know, but that is also not necessarily a problem. Sometimes I actually really like it when I can see through the layers of paint, and you see all the different colors that an artist has used until they've chosen one final color for the very, very top layer. That, I think, is really cool. That's one of the ways that I like to experience art, is through that seeing the artist's process at work, and seeing, because it's kind of like seeing their mind functioning. And as an artist myself, it's like I want to know, especially, there's lots of artists that have died hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and it's not like you can just get them on the phone, or died so long ago we don't even know how they did what they did. So sometimes we have to be like a detective, and looking at the painting we start to kind of uncover why. What else here? We haven't used much ultramarine blue. I am gonna wash my brush here this is the first time I've washed my brush in like 10 minutes, right? Okay. I don't think I've used any ultramarine blue anywhere, so where should I put this? I'm going to put this right on her dress here. I find it really satisfying using a big brush sometimes, and just like you can just throw so much color into a picture so quickly. Of course, the danger is it's because it doesn't have a lot of precision. You can take a picture you're really happy with and send it into another place, like, very easily, maybe too easily. So But that's the thing about also making paintings. The more paintings you make is, you don't obsess so much about the ones that didn't turn out. It's like, approaching people to go out on a date, right? If you only ever approach one person and you get turned down and you're just like, oh, well, I guess this whole dating, meeting people thing just doesn't work for me. I'm going to retire from the whole business. Well, that's plenty of people do that, but if you just start going out and you're just asking everybody, well, you'll forget who you've asked, and after a while you just stop caring. You're like, oh, whatever. And then when somebody actually says, yeah, let's go on a date, like, oh, well, that's interesting. You're like the 400th person I've asked, and first person is, you probably wouldn't want to tell them that. They'd be like, oh, maybe I should be a little bit more choosy. All these cool comments coming in here. I don't know if anyone's sent an image for me to look at. Okay, so there's my 15-minute timer. And Michael, you've still got lots of painting to do. So I'm just going to keep on going here until I finish this. So you see how to get some areas, you can turn your picture, you can rotate the canvas. Another thing, I like painting with my... Oops, why am I on this view here? That's bizarre. I've been on this view the whole time. Where am I? Let's do this view. Another thing that... what I was just doing here, which you can see without my big head in the way, is, if I want to get more precise, it's just kind of rotating the brush up onto its side. And, if I want it to get even kind of thinner, I can kind of flatten it on here, right? And you can now see it becomes even more sharp, and that allows me to kind of get into some of these areas. So as we get closer towards the end of our second class, if you're enjoying this and you find it helpful, again, sharing it with your friends, writing about it, posting about it, even just sharing the link. You don't have to say anything about it. That's one way of saying thanks that I certainly appreciate. Another way is to make a small contribution via PayPal or Patreon. The link's below in the video description. So, there's people who contribute $5, $1, the price of a cup of coffee. If you think this was as useful as a cup of coffee, then I would be very grateful and humbled by your contribution. If you have a lot more disposable income to contribute, then I'd be just as appreciative. I think it's, not everybody has money to spend, especially these days, but it certainly helps keep the lights on for me. Eventually, I'm slowly putting together these. I'm going to edit these videos down and make them a little bit faster so they're not a couple hours long. And, maybe by that point, I'll put these videos behind like a paywall and people have to pay to get to them. So you guys are going to get a free opportunity to watch them and participate. And then I'm also, the goal is to make a book with some of this artwork. As I said, I've been teaching this class for years in person. But you know, it's obviously when I'm teaching in person, I don't have all this technology recording things, and so then I sort of do the class again from scratch, and it's sort of not preserved anywhere. So what I really like about doing this is I can teach the class, and then even when or if life returns to normal and people say, oh, I missed class number 3 or whatever, I can go, oh yeah, well, I made a recording of that. You can just go jump on the web and watch it from home. And so it kind of accomplishes a lot of different things for me. The other thing you'll see, you know, I plan on teaching 40 episodes of this class. So we will cover a lot of ground, and I don't expect people to tune into every single one of them. You may be able to watch, well, especially once we start painting paintings, you know, like kind of like this, because we'll be painting paintings by Van Gogh and Edvard Munch and so on. Maybe there's artists that you're more into or less into, and so you can kind of pick and choose which ones you tune into. And so for me, it's also an opportunity to really play around, because usually when I'm teaching these classes, I don't teach 40 classes of painting. You know, I might teach 10 or 12 or 5, depending on where and the outline for the course. So this is an opportunity for me to teach like everything I know, get it on record, and if you're a teacher yourself, you know, it's a lot easier to teach something the second, third, fourth time after you've worked out some of the problems. So, and I'll be the first to admit, these don't always go perfectly according to plan. So, what other color? I don't think I've used... I think I'm going to switch from this big brush. And for right now, I'm going to leave this big brush in the water, because there's paint that's kind of soaked right up into this metal fastener, the ferrule, and I want to make sure that the brush, some of that water can soak itself up and eat away at that paint, so that when I do wash my paintbrush, that has it's you know, it's sort of like letting a pan sit in the sink for a few hours before you go, and you know, it just makes cleanup a little bit easier and faster. So, you know, again, you could see how you could apply this same sort of process of just kind of randomly painting to anything, right? It doesn't have to be a dancer. We could have drawn an old shoe, a heart, a diamond. You know, you could take a picture of a famous actor and just start kind of playing around with some, you know, you just kind of quickly draw it like this and just randomly fill in colors. You know, if you go on Google Images, you could just type in paint by numbers, right? And you'll get a whole bunch of different images, and then you could try drawing those onto a canvas and then painting from there, right? Like lots of different possibilities. So, you know, I mean, obviously I'd love for you to tune in again next class and continue painting with me, but you know, you could, during the course of the weekend, make a whole bunch more paintings with the same sort of approach. Yikes, okay. Fingers. Let's see if I can clean that up a bit. I just did it again. Made a mess or and just I was about to say, make sure if you're going to do this that your finger's clean, and then I just go and do it. So, if you're doing this sort of thing and you start kind of making a bit of a mess, at some point, what I do is just like, you just walk away from it, and you're just like, okay, I'm going to let that area dry rather than constantly trying to fix it. And then maybe once it's dry, I'll be able to go back in and do something there. Let's color. So this is my favorite part of making a painting, is getting to this point where I can then be more like a chess player, and I can be like, okay, I see your knight and to what, L4 or whatever. I am going to move a orange into L9 or whatever. Checkmate. Right? I just find it's, like, for me, really fun to be in this place where I can then really kind of play with these colors, and then I can see, are they working the way I want? Do I need to put something else here and there? The other thing too, which is this, I mean, this is the worst example of it because these are two most recent colors I painted and they're both wet, is if you're painting all over the place, it's more likely that something will dry, that the colors you're about to go right up next are going to be dry, so you don't have to worry about the colors kind of from one area jumping onto your paintbrush and then smudging around, and which can drive you a little bit nuts. And as I'm looking at this, I've got a lot of paint still on my palette, which I should know better. Now I showed you last class, I have a tool that allows me to put my canvas into and keep it wet over the course of the week, so that I don't have to worry about it. I could keep this. Remember I showed you this thing here with this sponge that I get nice and wet, and then I can put this inside. So I can do that. If you don't have something like that, you can just get a large Tupperware piece and just get a couple sponges wet, put them inside there, and that moisture will kind of circulate inside of that enclosed environment and keep the palette nice and wet. Okay, so I've got, I could stop any moment here, but I'm just going to maybe go for another few minutes and just sort of talk about what I'm looking at this picture. And again, this is my favorite part of making paintings. Usually it's that initial kind of burst and just throwing paint everywhere, and then it's this moment where, often what I'll do is I'll kind of, let's say, prop the picture up against something, right? And then you stand off to the side. Right? And you're just sort of like looking at it. In Hollywood movies, they're furiously smoking cigarettes. Oh, and it's drinking their whiskey. What am I going to do? Smash it in the bottle, right? So maybe you need to do a little bit of that to really get into the full spirit. I'm not going to show you personally how to smash bottles and tear your canvases up. Maybe there's somebody else on YouTube who shows you how to do that. But what I am going to do here is just sort of, I'm looking at the picture, and what do I want to do now? It is kind of the question. Do I want this figure to come forward? Do I want it to be obvious that this is a dancer? Or do I want her to disappear, this flamenco dancer, into the background? Currently, right now, it's a little bit ambiguous. right? Like if I was to show this to people and say, hey, this is called flamenco dancer, what do you think? I think a bunch of people would look at it for a bit and be like, oh, really? Where's the dancer? And I go, oh, see, those are her arms. That's her head. This is her dress, and here's her legs. And I go, huh, interesting. Yeah, okay, yeah, I guess it's could be a flamenco dancer, sure. And that may not be the reaction that I want. Having said that, there's many artists make a career doing that, right? And they purposely kind of riding the edge between recognizability and non-representation or abstraction, right? Which aren't the same things. Abstraction and non-representation are not the same thing, so you don't have to. I know very well what the difference is, but anyway. So let's say I do want people to see that there's a dancer in here. What could I do? I imagine most of you do want that for her to be visible. Okay, well, I might need to do a few things, such as maybe right off the bat here, this leg being kind of green and this one being orange. Maybe that's not so effective. And the fact that this green leg is surrounded by green also not helping the cause. So I could change this color to orange, or let's say I could change this to orange. So I'm going to change her leg to orange here. Now, what might happen if I do this is especially if this is still wet, is that some of that color could mix into my color and create a bit of a change. There's also the color, even if it's dry, if this paint that I'm applying right now is a little bit semi-transparent, then it's going to essentially mix, right? Because now there's the green showing through the yellow and mixing, creating a kind of green as well, right? Now, do I want that or not? I don't know. It's definitely improved here. That was the warm yellow. I think if I just add, let's see if I add a little bit of the cool yellow into here. Now these two yellows are mixing a little bit, so I don't mind that for right now. I think that's acceptable. It's not the same kind of orange down here. I don't know if personally that doesn't bother me at all. So how do you feel about your picture? Okay, so that's one way is to change your colors a little bit. If I was really unhappy with some areas, what I would do is let it dry really well, like, give it a couple hours or let it dry overnight. And then I'd break out my white. Now we're not going to use white until our fourth class. So we won't even use it next class. So if you haven't got your white or black, don't worry, we won't use them just yet. But I could paint out that area white, let it dry, and when it's dry, it's just like having a blank canvas, or at least in that area all over again. In fact, I've done this at times, if, let's say years go by and students don't pick up their old artwork, I'll just take a big brush, paint over them with white, and there might be some texture showing through, but then I use those for my examples as I'm painting. Anyway, let's see, I want to try to finish this in about 10 minutes. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to do a little bit of outlining. Now, if I look at this, one of the darkest colors is this warm red and cool blue, right? Especially towards the blue, it got really dark. So I am going to, you see, I'm already putting my color wheel to practice. So if I rotate this back to my cool, did I say my warm red? My warm red and my cool blue. So let's take a scoop here, a scoop here, mix them together, and look at this, and pretty dark color. All right, nice and dark. And I'm also just going to kind of twist my brush, and I'm going to twist and kind of pull it away. And as I do it, it's going to make a nice sharp point with my paintbrush. So now what I'm going to do is, let's say I'm going to outline a few places in this painting. All right, so this will immediately cause this shape to kind of pop, because now it's different than anything else in here. Nothing else has been outlined in that way, so it's really kind of shouting out, like, to people, to the viewer, like, hey, something different is happening here. Pay attention. Look at me. I'm a different type of shape. So same thing here. And you can see I can turn my canvas to help me do this, right? Okay. Now I don't necessarily have to outline everything. I could if I wanted, but I could also think of it as, like, let's say a shadow. So, or like the darker side of an object. And so one side, if I want, I could even put a light outline. So outline doesn't necessarily mean that it's a dark color either, right? So maybe I'll even do that. Ah! You know, they say most accidents happen when you're close to home, right? I always find that when I'm, getting close to finishing a painting, that's when I start making my all the big so-called mistakes, right? Because you're just like, oh, I'm almost done. I can't wait. I'm gonna go celebrate. And then, once your mind leaves the painting zone, that's when you do something you're not happy with. Another thing too, as I'm doing this, I generally am dragging the brush towards my body, or at least if it's pointed, I'm kind of away, right? If I'm trying to do this pushing forward, then the bristles, they have nowhere to go because they get caught and they kind of bulge outwards. Okay. As I picked up a little bit of that yellow, which wasn't dry on my brush, which is okay. Again, this doesn't necessarily have to all be done right now. Maybe, if you run into a problem or a mistake, maybe, and rather than just fighting the canvas, it might be just the painting telling you, hey buddy, time to take a break. Don't you have anything else to do in your life? Am I the only thing you got going? Why don't you go play some video games, or go bug your wife, or play with your kids? Jeez. I find my paintings do a lot of talking. So sometimes they're very supportive, and then sometimes my paintings can be really cranky. And they're like that. They're like some angry old man, at a bus stop, shouting at cars driving by. Sometimes I've got paintings that are like that, and you're just like, geez, why am I spending time with you? You're making my life miserable. In which case, Those are the paintings that are turned against the wall and haven't been touched in a while. No wonder they're so angry, right? Okay. That's pretty good. I keep telling people I'm going to be done in a minute, and this is how painting takes over your life. You're like, yeah, I'll be there for dinner in 5 minutes, and then like the next thing you know, you hear the birds chirping outside, and the sun is rising. You're like, have I really been painting all night long? Okay. So let's see. Now, this is probably where I would want to use a little bit of white into my mixture, and we'll talk about why in a little bit. But because this cool white or cool yellow is not opaque enough to really make for a good outline, but I think it might be helpful just for you to see that, right? See, I'm trying to paint like a nice yellow right here to outline, but it's not going to work. So instead, let's make it kind of a bright orange. Because this red is going to be a little bit more opaque. Can you see? Or maybe. So I think I'm going to call it a day there. I could keep on going on this, which I've done many times on many paintings. I think, again, this is the kind of situation where I might want to just set this aside, walk away for a little while, whether you think it's great or awful. Walk away, set it to dry. In this case, I could let it stand up. There's not too much thick paint on there that's going to slide off onto the floor or whatever. So I could, if you have like a really dusty environment, let's say you're painting on a balcony, you probably want to try to find a place indoors for your painting to dry so that, dust or bugs and stuff don't kind of make home on your picture. Okay. So maybe just the last couple seconds here before we go, I'm just going to quickly, look at like 100 comments or something here. Thank you so much, everybody, for putting in, answering that question about what materials you're using, what kind of brand of paint. That's super cool to know. Because, if I found out everybody was using a certain brand, that might be a good idea for me maybe to get a different one so that we're all using the same material. Cheryl says, I wasn't able to be there for first class. Is there a link so that I can watch it? Yeah, so if you want to watch the previous videos, you're watching my YouTube channel right now. So you just kind of look below where it says Markowsky Art, and you can click on that and it'll go to my channel page, and you'll see there's a playlist for this class. You can click on that, or you can just click on videos and go most recent, and it'll show you all of them. And I think in the description below, and if not, I'll put it there. I'll put the playlist link, and you just click the playlist. It opens up, and it'll play the first one. If you've seen the first one, you just click next, and it'll jump to the next one. Click next, and so on and so forth, right? A lot of Liquitex, Golden and Liquitex, Winsor and Newton. That's another big brand I forgot to mention too. Louise says, you're awesome. Thanks, Louise. Or are you talking about me? Because then Irene says, thank you. Who knows? But I'll take the compliment. PBO Studio, lots of happy birthday messages. Thank you, everybody. Kit Cat says, we know the primary color names. What about the names for the ones you made on Tuesday and the name of color ones combined today? The names, please. Well, names of color is kind of subjective. Like there people try to name things and they want everybody to follow that same naming conventions. But that's why, you know, not that's what makes it a little bit confusing when you go to the art supply store. Hey, I want the primary cyan, but I want the golden brand. And they go, well, we don't have a primary cyan, but we've got one almost identical that is, you know, cyan deep. And you're like, okay, is that oh, we have another one called, to get it, it's just like, it drives you nuts. So essentially, though, these 6 colors would be your primaries. You mix those, then you get your secondaries, and in between the primaries and secondaries, you have your tertiary colors. That's kind of the generic name for it. But I'm not going to start naming all of these colors because it'll be different for everybody, and everyone's got a different one, and it's going to look different on your screen. But it's an interesting concept. You know, again, there are hex codes like in Photoshop or on the computer, or, CMYK numbers that you can punch in to get an exact end. But even then, the actual names of them, if you put that number into Google, you'll see that, you know, on Wikipedia will show several different names for the same exact color. Oui, Marceau. That's good. Madeline says, I'm a college student and my prof forgot to turn his slideshow presentation for the class today and nobody said anything for 3 to 5 minutes. Yeah, that's the world we're living in right now, is people talking to themselves and everyone just sitting there watching and smiling. How long will this moron continue talking before they realize their camera's not working or their microphone's not working? Chances are everyone in your class thinks their internet isn't working. Ah, that's true. That's also funny. A lot of other people, like for instance, I was teaching the other day and I had a couple of 2 different microphones going and there's this crazy echoing, and I saw somebody write, oh, I'm getting crazy echo, and I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. Until later on, and I watched the video over again, and everybody was clearly hearing the crazy echo, and I'm like, if somebody had told me, I could have just muted one of the microphones. Sandy says, is Palash enjoying the class? I'm not sure if Palash was still there at that time. Susan says, this is a fabulous class. Thank you. Thank you, Susan, for tuning in and for leaving such a nice comment. I appreciate that. Kit Kat says, with those 6 tubes of paints after the end of the course, will there be any left over if all classes are painted? It depends on the size of the tube of paint you're using. I would say after 40 classes, I'll probably have maybe half or a little more than half of the tube will have been used or left over. It's hard to say. You know, sometimes it depends. Like if I just, you know, sometimes unconsciously I end up painting a lot of blue pictures. Well, then obviously I'm going to use more blue paint. But you know, I would, again, some people have tubes of paint that are half the size of this. So how much paint will be left over? I would say with these big ones, I'll have, like for instance, when I teach a class of 20 people, I'll buy a fresh set of tubes, and usually by the end, the tubes are almost empty. And so we're talking, I don't know, 300 paintings or so are used to make those. So again, that gives you an idea of how much, and then, but of course, there's always a couple people who squeeze a lot of paint onto their palettes. So it's, I don't know what to tell you. I would say though, for about $100 in terms of materials to get you off and running, you know, and that includes your paints, your brushes, like a dozen canvases, a palette. $100 is a pretty good, is probably one of the cheapest hobbies you can get into. It doesn't seem like that when you go to the art supply store and you have all this stuff in your hands, but when you think about how expensive it is to join a hockey league and you've got to buy all the pads and the skates and your stick and rent the ice time and blah blah blah, or like violin, you got to rent a violin and you got to pay the teacher and you got to like get it tuned up and wax the strings and their bow breaks and blah blah blah. $100 is like, I mean, I don't know, pretty much you can't find a better deal that I can think of, except drawing. Drawing is maybe the cheapest. Kit Kat says, oh, the white and the black too. Yeah. Jean Mac Ole, thank you for doing these videos. Thank you for tuning in and watching. Thank you. Joyce says, just wondering if there's any chance you could give us a drawing ahead of time so we can draw on the canvas before class. I'm not good at drawing. Again, if you're finding yourself falling behind, just pause this video. Take a second. You got to go to the bathroom, pause the video, right? If I'm working, doing my drawing, and I'm trying to go as slow as possible, because there are other people who are sitting there like, oh man, this guy's going so slow. So just pause it. You're not missing anything. All the rest of the video is still being recorded, and when you press play, the full video will remain there. Or if your computer crashes, it's all saved on YouTube, and you can go watch it whenever you want. Cynthia says she's using the Artist Series paint. Jasmine says, watched the class and painted with my 11-year-old daughter. She loved it. We are in for the next 38 classes. Thank you very much for doing this. Great, thanks, Jasmine. Great to see you, and I'm so glad you're painting with your daughter, right? Doing art classes is fantastic. Doing art classes with a friend or family member is even better, because you can, a lot of people take my in-person classes together and they go have a glass of wine first or afterwards, and they're just laughing away, playing with their paints, comparing what they're doing. So you can do the same thing with a couple friends, right? You're both watching from your house, but afterwards you take a picture and you send it back and forth, or you could be chatting, you could have your phone on while you're on your computer screen, giggling and laughing away. Maybe I got paint on my face and you're all talking about how silly I look. Cynthia says, happy birthday, West Coast Swing. This is amazing. I feel I'm actually learning how to be an artist. Thank you. I love that. That's the goal, right? And I think the more people that know how to paint, the better of a world we're going to have. And you could see it's not brain surgery. It gets more and more complicated the more difficult the paintings get, obviously. But the more you understand this basics, I think it's so much more fun. Kit Kat, so if we bought those large tubes, then we wouldn't need to buy more. Yeah, so I guarantee you, if you buy these large tubes of paint, you'll get 40 paintings out of it. Depending, again, I've got enough paint still on my palette here for next class's lesson. That tells me that next time I shouldn't squeeze so much paint out on my canvas or on my palette. But that's something you learn once and then you don't repeat, although I've been painting for 20 years and I made the same mistake. So if I've got a lot of paint on it, you could try putting some saran wrap on here. I find that the saran wrap kind of sags and it gets into the paint, and then when you're peeling the saran wrap off, it's just a big mess. So a thing of Tupperware, I've seen people also paint on, let's say, one thing you could do is if you had a bunch of little lids from peanut butter lids. Let's say you had one for yellow, or a couple different for the different yellows and blues and reds, and then you could kind of stack them up inside some Tupperware. And you'd want to have a little sponge or cloth or something that's wet inside there just to keep the paint moist so it doesn't start to harden up on you. Lots of different ways to approach that problem. Okay, so I am sure everybody is more than done for the day. And so I'm going to leave it there for everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel. If you want to do a quick donation, PayPal link is below. Patreon eventually, when I've got 5 minutes in between all the other things I'm doing, that will be live, but it'll be there, and eventually I'll put them on all the old videos. So if you're watching a year from now, you'll see it. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for taking the time out of your own busy schedules to be here with me today. And we will see you next week, same time, same place, for episode number 3. and we're gonna probably next week is maybe the most useful class, painting class, you will ever learn or attend. So don't miss it, and if you do, it'll always be there for you to watch whenever you like. Okay, we'll talk to you soon, everybody.